Yeah, let's go to him. David Littleproud, good morning to you. Before we go to that, though, I just want to start with one of our top stories today. It's this terrible death of the Australian aid worker. So what is new about this morning is that her family have called for a war crime investigation to be opened up on the soldiers responsible for her death. Israel has admitted to a mistake. So what do you think the punishment should be here, pending that investigation?
Yeah, look, I think we need to be careful, and while my heart goes out to the family and appreciate the trauma that they're feeling, we need to understand that this is a war zone, and it's a very fluid situation where you can't control the environment entirely. There was a mistake made. The Israeli government has made a commitment to the Australian government that they'll be transparent in the events that took place and help to make sure that this type of event doesn't happen again. But you don't appreciate these people are brave and selfless in everything they've done in going there to volunteer, but they are going into a war zone, and it's not a controlled environment, one in which can be controlled easily, and mistakes will happen. And I think so long as there's transparency from the Israeli government, which they've demonstrated and continue to say that they will, then I think we just need to be careful and let this play through and understand that this is a tragic accident.
Yeah, so when it comes to questions of sanctions or anything like that, you wouldn't be supportive of that?
I think if there's transparency and the Israeli government have shown deep remorse, I think we just need to be careful in understanding while the grief is raw, there is circumstances here beyond the control of a government itself, and they admit the mistake, that those mistakes happen in an environment such as war, and I think we just need to be careful about how far we take that.
Okay, given the strong language that was used by the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister yesterday, do you think our position on Israel is changing or about to?
I think obviously we'd like to see that there's a ceasefire, but obviously you've got to appreciate the Israeli government is acting on an unprovoked attack in October last year, where their citizens were basically murdered in broad daylight. And what, if any government, if that happened here in Australia, then Australian citizens would expect us to eradicate the terrorist threat that took that out on its people. And the Israeli government is only doing what you would expect its people is expecting of them. So we obviously want to make sure that they can minimise the number of casualties, the civilian casualties. But when you are fighting a terrorist organisation that is cowardly hiding behind civilians, then it makes the situation even more complex than what it needs to be. And you get these mistakes, tragic mistakes that took place in the last couple of days. And this is why it is a challenging environment, one in which obviously we'd like to see a ceasefire, but that could also help if Hamas release the remaining prisoners that they have as well, hostages that they have.
Okay, let's get to supermarkets. David, Peter Dutton threatening electricity-style big stick laws to break up supermarket giants if they abuse market power. Now, you started this. It now seems the Libs are along for the ride. So what's the coalition policy going to be?
Yeah, well, Angus Taylor and I are working through that at the moment. And while the Nationals support in principle broader divestiture powers, what we need to understand is that there are nuances to the supermarkets and their market dominance that need to be looked at, and some of the existing architecture that's already there. So Angus Taylor and I are looking at what is existing codes, like the Grocery Code of Conduct that is voluntary at the moment, but how that interacts with the Dairy Code, the Horticultural Code, and even the Wine Code for that matter, because these supermarkets have reached further, and making sure there's punitive penalties for misbehaviour by the supermarkets, not only on farmers, but on price gouging with consumers. And at the moment, the biggest penalty on the grocery code is about $140,000. I mean, they'd pull that out of a till in one of their Melbourne stores each morning. So there needs to be punitive penalties. There needs to be an independent arbiter. At the moment, the supermarkets have their own independent arbiter built in with that they employ themselves. It should be at arm's length. But we also need to look at this thing called land banking. And what these big supermarkets have done is buy up large tracts of land around not only their stores, but also in shopping centres. They've taken big stakes that reduce other competition coming in. And so what we want to make sure is we get the architecture right, because what the Greens propose could have unintended consequences of not improving and increasing competition. And that's what we're going to try and design in the coming weeks.
Well, look, to further that point, and this is just an isolated case, but it might well be bigger than that. There's parts of Sydney that has a huge Woolworths, and then close by there's another Woolies, but it's the smaller metro one. So it's basically occupying two parts of the same building. That's kind of what you're referring to there?
Exactly, and this is the sort of behaviour that they've been able to get away with. But if the supermarkets believe they're innocent, then it'll never be used. These penalties are all deterrents, and that's what legislators do, whether that be for criminal crimes, that we send people away to jail for jail sentences, is that meant to be a deterrent. But I think the evidence is clear, not only on price gouging. We saw a 60-70% reduction in sheep and cattle prices at the farm gate in June, but only an 8% at the checkout, that the evidence was clear that these supermarkets were taking advantage of their dominance. And when you hear some of the evidence of cherry producers pulling out trees because they sent a semi-load of cherries that are worth $95,000 but only get $5,000 for it because they had a couple of blemishes on 10,000 pieces of fruit. Well, something's not right, and that's when government should take action to protect suppliers and consumers.
Just quickly, David, when do you think you'll firm up that position, that policy? When do you reckon that'll be done by?
Oh, look, that's in the coming weeks. Angus and I have already made a head start on that. This has been a long belief of the National Party for some time. So we've got a lot of the architecture done, but it's making sure that there aren't any unintended consequences in reducing competition rather than increasing it.
Okay, a couple of weeks. Look forward to talking to you a little more about that. David, appreciate it. Talk to you soon.